guys. A shit show, a pure shit show. It literally takes a village.
I don't know if it was dirty or clean.
Oh my God.
Bad mom.
Like
Gone
that
wild. Yes.
Because I'm shining.
Woo! That was good, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
She never said that.
Oh,
So bad
sorry.
luck, Janelle.
I'm in a rush to introduce her. Okay, welcome Jessica to the show. Thank you for coming on to give us a perspective of how life is as a mother of one.
Of course. Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Jessica, go ahead and start by telling us your story. Did you always picture yourself with only one child?
No, actually, to be quite honest, I didn't really know if I was going to have children. When I was younger, it was just me and my sister as siblings. And my mom always felt like, oh, I'm sorry, we couldn't have more. We don't have more. And we were always like, no, we're fine. Like, we don't need anyone else. So to me, I didn't feel, I don't know, it was really odd. Like, I was very career motivated. So very young, I felt like by this age, I'm going to have this done. By this age, I'll do this. And then afterwards, maybe by the time I'm 40, I'll have kids, if I have kids. Mm-hmm. So not really, like, it was just really odd, I guess.
So rewind a little bit. Was she a surprise or was she planned?
No, she was a blessing of a surprise. I guess you could say. I'm like, yeah. And I really am, I mean, obviously, because she's my daughter and everything, but I am so grateful for having had her at the time that I did. And just the way that, like, my life altered. I've learned so much and I've grown so much. And then now I think of that person I used to envision, oh, I'm not going to have kids. I'm like, oh my God, that life would have sucked. Like, that would have been such a terrible life. And I got married young and my husband was in the military. So I think that kind of clicks and it makes you grow up a little bit faster. Uh-huh. So then we had our blessing and we're like, oh, okay, well, that's what you do. You get married, you have your kid, and then you move on. Like, So yeah, definitely not planned, but very glad it happened when it happened. For sure.
And side question, I just want to know for my kids, how were you so career oriented? Mm-hmm. Like, did your parents put that in your head at a young age?
My dad, he has always been like a labor worker, and my mom as well. But my mom made sure that whether it was a school event or whatever it was, she was always present. So it was a field trip, whatever. But they always instilled in me and my sister, the best thing you could do is probably go to school. So they didn't care what career we would pick. Really did not care, as long as you go to school and you're doing something that you really like. So they encouraged for us to peek into the arts, peek into whatever. Obviously, any parent's going to say, well, if you go into like anything dealing with math or whatever, like, it's much better for you or whatnot. But my sister and we were always more of the creative side, I guess you could say. Mm-hmm. So very early on, I told my mom, I'm going to be a meteorologist when I was 5. And she was like, yes, sure, do your thing. And then it was kind of like a joke. And from there on, I was obsessed with television and radio. So then I was like, no, like, I really think that's for me. So when I was in high school, that's why I was like, no, I don't think I might not have children, or maybe, that won't work out, or I'll have it till I'm like 40, because I understood that scheduling and everything, it just wasn't logical, Yeah.
Okay, so you had your career plan.
Yeah.
Now, in the career plan, marriage was included, but not kids until later.
So my mom would probably be like, ay, Dios mío, because it's like traditional, Hispanic growing up. Like, you get married and then you can do whatever you want. You can have kids, you can travel, whatever. But very early, well, I don't think I want to get married. And if I do get married, I'll probably do that too once I'm 40. And I'm totally fine with living with my significant other. Like, it's going to be fine. Like, my family will get over it. Like, it'll be totally fine. And I mean, that she got, like, I got married and then we moved in. So that worked out for her. But it wasn't like something that I envisioned when I was little, like at all. I never played dolls and said, oh, this is how I want my dream wedding to be. No, like it just never really, I never imagined myself like that. I knew one day maybe, but I never imagined it, which is really odd. So I don't know.
That's cool.
And when did you realize you weren't gonna have any more children?
I think it was more of our family asking after we had our daughter. They were like, so when are you gonna have your other one? And I was like, well, we have one and we're doing great. So like, you know, we may not need another one. And if we do, maybe it'll be later on. And it was constant. And then she was 5. And then all of a sudden she was 10. And people were like, okay, that gap is huge. So you're probably not going to have any more kids, right? And we're like, well, maybe we want one more. And for her, it wasn't really like a demand where she was asking, oh, I want a sibling. I want a sibling. She was very content for the most part, until I think she turned about, I think it was maybe when she was 7, because she realized that other kids had siblings at her school and they'd get picked up and then they'd go pick up their siblings. So then she was like, well, how come I don't have any siblings? And how come, you know, other kids do and they have more than one? And we were like, well, you know, that's just how their family is and our family's different. And then she'd kind of get over it, but she never made like a really big deal about it. So then we compromised and we said, you can have a dog. So then we got her a dog.
Many moms worry about like the single child syndrome where they're like spoiled or lonely. Did you ever have fears of your own?
I think in the beginning, I did see other kids act out that were only children. And I thought, oh my God, that's going to be horrible. I cannot stand when they get everything they want. I cannot stand when, you know, they just have like outbursts and the parents are like, fine, whatever, just like let them do it. Like it's just them or whatever. So very early on, I don't know if it was also because my husband was in the military, we were pretty strict with our daughter. So we encouraged her to play and express herself, but we had a lot of rules. And I think up till this day, we're still very strict, and it would kind of throw people off because they're like, you guys are so young, because we had her fairly young. But we were pretty strict with her. So they're like, oh, okay. And thank God it worked out to our advantage because our kid was so well behaved and she really didn't throw tantrums. And I think a lot of it too, I was very honest with her growing up. So if she asked for a toy or whatever, I would just tell her, no, we can't buy it right now. And she'd be like, well, why can't we get it or whatever? I'd say, no, you can have it if you achieve this or if you do that, kind of like a reward system. Mm-hmm. So she'd be like, oh, okay. And then I'd kind of distract her to something else. So then it would kind of work out. But I really think it had to do with like the military type of sickness that maybe we took on. And it helped a lot, for sure. It helped a lot.
You mentioned that you would get questions from family like, when are you going to have another baby? Like, how did you feel with that pressure? Did you ever feel pressured or?
Yes, a lot. And I think it was like maybe even the year after, friends were like, oh, like she's growing up, like don't you want her to have a sibling? Like, we're like, yeah, that would be nice, but we were stationed in Florida and our family was all out here, and I just couldn't envision myself having another baby and then not having my mom or, you know, grandma's around or like other family members. So then we were kind of like, no, it's just not the time. You know. And then my husband was trying to get like his career path with the military, and we knew we had a certain time limit. So he was enlisted for 6 years, and we're like, oh, maybe by the time that we come back, and then, you know, yeah, it's a gap, but whatever. And then we came back, and then we had been going to school, but at that point we went back to school full time completely. So then we realized there's no way, like that's even out of the question, because if we can't be with our daughter all the time, then how are we going to bring another person, you know? So it's like, no, it doesn't make sense. We'll wait until we're done with school. So then he chose a career where his education took 5 years. And I mean, it worked out great, but it took him 5 years. And then with me, I had been going to community college since I was pregnant. And then I did a transfer for the last 2 years, but we've been in school technically since I was pregnant with my daughter.
Really?
Yes. So it was like we were taking one class at a time on the military base, just trying to like get one class at a time online, or we were alternate and he would get home and I'd be like, okay, you have to go to school, take your 2 classes, and then I'll go to school the next day or whatever. So it just did not work out, you know, like in our timeline, I guess you could say. We were very realistic about that. But everyone would always say like, don't you think she's lonely? Like, don't you think she wants someone to be with? We're like, yeah, but don't you think the other child would want their parents to be there too?
Exactly.
Like, we need to both be present, and we're trying to do what we can to like have a better future. Or, you know, like if we have another baby, we'll have another baby. If we don't, then we just won't, and that's okay.
So it was never in the plan to not have another baby. It's just that you guys had all of these other priorities to set up in place first.
Yeah.
And then if the time happened, you would, or if the time came that you guys wanted another baby. Were you on birth control? Sorry if that's
I was. Oh, no. I was. But even then, I suffered from, you know, like menstrual issues from fairly young. So I think also when I was very young, another reason I really didn't envision having children is because I thought maybe I'm going to have complications and maybe that's just not in it for me. So I wouldn't really submerge myself into the idea of having a family of like 5. You know, I was like, if it happens, it happens. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. And quite honestly, when it happened, it was like, oh, I guess I can. Okay, cool. But I was on birth control, but that was because I had to regulate my cycle because my cycles were so bad. And then I was off of birth control for a while, but I was so sick. Bedridden. And at that point I had a job and I had to keep calling off and I had to say, I just can't, like, I can't even get out of bed. And even my dad was like, you need to go back on your medication. Like, you can't do that. Like, you're a mom, like, go back on medication. You have to do whatever you have to do, like, to keep doing this, you know, like you have to work, like you can't just stay in bed. So that was like inevitable. Like I've had that since, I don't know, like I've taken it for so long.
So while your daughter was getting older and you saw like the age gap growing for a potential child, did you feel like, oh crap, we gotta get on this? Or were you still like, it's okay? It seems like you're very like chill, like, oh, gotta just do this stuff first, you know?
Yeah. I think my husband, for the most part, was the one that felt like there was a timeline. He was like, okay, I don't want to be an old parent. Like, that is the last thing I want to do. He's like, we've been the young parent for like the longest time. He's like, and I actually enjoy that. And it's true, because we would go pick up our kids, and a lot of the times, like, you would see the other parents and then they were much elder, or, you know, and then yes. And he was just like, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to be like that. So please. And it was kind of like, I agreed with him, but it was kind of like a reality check once again, because I was like, well, what are we doing? Like, let's evaluate, what do we want? Like, what is our final goal? Like, you know, we can't just drop what we're doing with school. Like, this means a lot to us, or like work wise. So let's just get it over with. Like, if that's really our ultimate goal, like, we have to get everything else over with and kind of get our ducks aligned. And then we'll get there. If we get there, if we don't get there, then it just wasn't meant to be. And we have this beautiful, healthy, you know, kid. Let's just be grateful. So then he kind of was like, okay, fine. But I know that for him, getting close to 10, he was like, okay, Jessica, like, for reals, like, the clock is ticking. He's like, yeah, he's like, the clock is ticking. And if it's going to happen, I really think it needs to happen within like he would kind of be like, the next 2 years or something. And then we would joke around with our daughter and we'd be like, do you want another sibling? And I think even when she was older, sometimes she'd be like, yeah, it'd be nice. And then I tell her, well, you know, if you have another one, you have to deal with sharing and you have to deal with this and you have to deal with that. And like, you know, they're going to follow you around and like, you're so much older. And like, we would just kind of pick fun just to see what her vibe would be about it. Like, I don't care. Like, just give me another kid, you know, like, let me just have a sibling. Or if she was like, yeah, I guess it's fine. And she was always very relaxed, like, oh, okay, whatever. And then she'd say, I have my cousins. We're like, okay, good. And then we adopted our dog 4 years ago. So once we got the dog, we were like, you have your dog. And it's like the dog you always wanted, like play with your dog. And then there'd be days where she wouldn't want to like help pick up after the dog. And I'd be like, well, if you had a sibling, it'd be the same situation. Like the sibling wants to go outside and play. So why don't you go play with your dog? And she'd be like, fine. So she was very relaxed about it. But yeah, that timeline for sure. I know I didn't feel much pressure from it, but my husband definitely was like, I'm counting. Like, you need to figure something out. But
how old is your daughter? Sorry.
My daughter is 12.
And I was gonna say,
12 years old.
Are you and your husband the same age, or is someone older or younger? Or
yeah, he's 1 year older, so we're high school sweethearts as well. And even when I was in high school, I envisioned myself, whether we would get married or not, I envisioned following my career path, my meteorologist career path, or whatever I was trying to do. And then him doing his own thing, because at the time he was like, I'm going to be a firefighter. And I was like, yeah, sure, go for it. So I envisioned us living in San Diego and we were going to have this life and I was going to be in San Diego, but I always envisioned it with him. Oh. So I was always kind of set very young on. I was like, okay, but it worked out.
Yeah. And so when your family would pressure you, what would you tell them? Like, maybe it'll happen in the future, or like, how would you get them off your back? Because I know, like, immediately people start asking, like, you know,
that's always when you're dating, then there's
but especially when you have one for all these years, I'm sure you got it all the time.
Oh yeah, for sure. It was like family reunions, birthday parties, holidays. Other people are having kids, and then they're like, oh well, Jessica, like, hey Manuel, like all the time. My mom for the longest time would just tell me, I pray that, you know, you guys will just like give us another grandchild, or that you'll be like willing to just, and I tell her, like, I try to explain to her everything, you know, and I'm like, well, we have a timeline, we have goals, she's like, but God will help you, like God will guide you, and then if you know, you'll figure it out. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds great, but like, I think I'm gonna stick to my plan, and then we'll just, you know, we'll work it out after that. But oh yeah, for sure. I think it came up to the point where by the time she turned 10 once again, I think that kind of finally mellowed out. Everyone was just kind of like, oh, okay, she's gonna be an only child.
We're gonna leave them alone at this point. They're like,
this is
they
yeah,
know what
we're
they
gonna
want
let them
for
be
their own family.
like, yeah. And it's hilarious because my mom and my dad are complete opposites. Like, oh my God, my dad was like, and hence once again, it's only me and my sister, so he only has 2 daughters. He was like, you guys are fine, like you don't need any more kids. And I would joke with him, and I'd be like, well, don't you want a boy? Like, you never had a boy, like, you know, wouldn't it be fun to have like a boy? I just kind of joke around with him. He was like, no, you guys are fine. So then I would question him. I'd be like, were we that terrible that you didn't, like, if you could have chosen, would you just have had one child? And he's just like, no, I'm just letting you know, like, you guys are young, like you're almost done. And that to him, like my daughter entering middle school was like, you're almost done. He's like, travel, like do whatever you want, like you can do whatever you want, like you're
like,
fine. I was like,
you're gonna have to start over. You're gonna have to start over.
You're almost done with raising your child, not you're almost done with school. I thought he meant you're almost done with school, like finish, you know?
With our kids.
Like, travel, we get to travel with you guys. That is
And then my mom would be like, don't tell her that, like don't listen to him, like God will help you. Like, so complete opposites. They're hilarious. And I'd be like, okay, well, I'm glad to know that you're totally 100% content with just having one child. Like, thanks, Dad. But yeah, it is just, oh my God. But people are never, not necessarily ashamed or embarrassed, but they're like, so, when are you having this other one? Like, when is it happening? And it's exactly, you get engaged. So when are you getting married?
Yeah,
You got married. Okay, so when are you having the kid? When is the
Yep.
next kid coming? And it's like, just let me live my life and you can live yours. Like,
You mentioned her having cousins to play with. So you don't feel like she was ever lonely?
that I will say is one of the things that it does suck. So with the cousin situation, she has a cousin who they're 8 months apart.
Oh, that's perfect.
And they're very close. And we were so excited that they were that close. And we're like, great, they're gonna have a great relationship. Because I grew up with fairly close with my cousins. They're practically my siblings. And my sister and I are 5 years apart. So there was kind of that little gap. And then my sister joined us and it was like, okay, yay, But they moved to Kentucky.
Oh,
So
wow.
then when they moved, she took it pretty hard because she kept saying, well, this is like the only person I have that's my age and she's so far away. And I would try to explain to her, well, you can still call her, like you can FaceTime or whatever. She'd be like, yeah, but it's not the same. And they would come down and visit. And that's honestly like our favorite time of the year when they come down because they get together and we'd have them like we used to dress them up together like when they were little, or we try to do as much as we could together. And that was just the way that we were raised, my cousins and I. So we thought like, yeah, that's like perfect. So that was hard. And then she has younger cousins and she's the eldest. So I know that for a fact that is hard. That has been hard. Yeah. So if I had family members that had kids her age, I think her situation would completely be a little bit more different and probably a little smoother. But yeah, I know that she still talks about that move. She's like, she's just so far. Like, why do they have to be so far? But when they get together, they really are like the best.
So do you feel like that she she has to rely more on you and her dad as like playmates since?
So when she was little, because we were stationed away from our family, I was pretty much like her playmate,
Right.
and yeah, like her best friend. She had no choice. And then with the military, you have watch. You have like, so my husband's schedule was always either he was on watch at nighttime or he was on watch in the morning. So it was really just me and her, a lot of me and her. And sure, you socialize and you make friends, but a lot of them either didn't have children or they had a newborn baby, and it's like she can only do so much, with the little baby. So it was really up to me to just kind of distract her. And then my husband would like play with her too. But because of that, our daughter developed like she started talking very quickly because she was just around adults pretty much most of the time. And then when we would come down and visit, she was still pretty much the only child. Like there wasn't other people that had kids around her age other than my her little cousin, and that was it. So she didn't get that interaction until she would come down and visit for the holidays. So yeah, we definitely had to fill in with that. And I think in a way it helped her kind of like her mentality grow up a little bit faster and like learn words and be, yes, like she knew how to behave around adults. But for sure, I will say that's kind of like where the only child syndrome could maybe kick in. Because then she knew, she was like, I'm the only kid in this crowd. So if we're having a gathering and I ask or I say, like, you guys are going to pay attention to me. So we'd be like, oh, okay. We'd give her like her 5 minutes to like shine or whatever. And they would be like, okay, Sala, how about you come over here now and you play with these toys? Or so I would give her her time, but then I didn't want her to feel like she needed that all the time from adults, because adults will drop anything. If they see a kid, they're like, oh, how cute, or like whatever. Well, what do you want? Or like, anyone comes up to you like, will you color with me? Okay, sure. And you're having like a full-blown adult gathering. And that's really not normal. Like you shouldn't have to do that. Like the kid should be able to do its own thing. So I would give her like 5 minutes and then be like, okay, that's enough. Like, come on. Like, you have to do you, you know? So yeah, I definitely was her best friend for like the longest time. So it was like, okay.
How did you balance? Because I know people who have an only child, and I hear that they struggle with balancing like me time versus being their playmate, and they feel guilty because they don't have another sibling. You know?
Yeah.
How did you ever have those hard times?
I would tell her that she had to do, like, let's say she wanted to play with something, and I tell her, okay, you have to play with your Legos, like do something with your Legos, or color this or do that. So kind of almost have her do that alone time thing. And then I'd be like, show me when you're done, and then I'll come and I'll join you. And she'd be like, okay. And when she was smaller, I had to kind of give her like, okay, so when you hear this alarm go off, it means that you're alone, like your time is up, like I can join you or whatever, because she's younger. And she still actually does that now when she's much older. She'll be like, oh, do you want to do this? I'm like, yeah, sure. But I'll tell her, well, how about you practice your ukulele for like, 30 minutes, and then I'll come and join you. And she just kind of, so she knows the drill. She's like, oh, fine. I'm gonna go do this. And then sure.
You give her independent time. Like it's like an independent time, which is healthy, because a lot of kids don't know what to do when they're bored, or know what to do by themselves. A lot of adults don't know what to do by themselves. So that's really healthy to teach them to be able to be independent.
And I'm not saying that it was her favorite time. I mean, obviously she hates, like, she's like, oh, fine. But like, she understood, like, okay, I know where you're coming from. Like, all right, fine.
Plus, with you being in school, and I'm sure you had to figure out ways to be creative and balance that independent time for yourself too. So yeah. Did you ever feel like she went through like a selfish phase? Or like the world revolved around her kind of thing? Because I know that's like another myth, is like when you have your own kid, the world revolves around you.
I definitely have seen that. In other children. I think.
How did you guys make sure to balance that?
I think it honestly has a lot to do with the children's personality also. And then just the boundaries that you kind of set as a parent. I think, that has a lot to do with it, because any child has a potential to behave that way or do that, really, if you feed into it, or you encourage it, or you're just like, oh my God, I'm not going to deal with it. Like, fine. Then for sure, like you're going to deal with it and you're going to regret it so much. So I think personality wise, when she was younger, she was very much more outspoken. She did like attention. She was also very friendly. So she just wanted, like, she used to come around people and she'd be like, let's talk about. And they'd be like, oh, okay, well, what are we going to talk about? She'd be like, I don't know, let's talk about. Like, what do you want to talk about? And they'd be like, okay. and it was just kind of like her conversation starter type of thing. And we just kind of joke about it. We'd be like, you can honestly talk about anything. She doesn't care. Like, it'll be fun. She's like, okay. But as she got older, she did become a little more reserved. So it's kind of like, even till now, it's a little harder to kind of get her out of her shell, but I mean, she's a tween, like, that's totally expected. And even family members are like, oh, well, like, she's just not like, like as outgoing as she used to be. And I'm like, well, how were you when you were a tween? Like, you're trying to figure things out. Like, of course you're going to be more reserved. But no, I think it's really the boundaries as a parent that you set, and kind of waving out excuse me, the personality of the child. So some children are going to be way more outspoken and demand way more attention and, want it like really badly, and others will just be more reserved, I suppose. So I guess she was just good.
What about for like spoiling? Because I know, so she's the only granddaughter for a while, right? So I'm sure even if you guys are not spoiling her, but it's hard to keep parents from spoiling. How did you guys handle that?
That one is hard, because as a parent, you want to give them, like, obviously everything you didn't have, and you want them to, have the cool new things or whatever. but there's a way that you come up with. Either you did this, you had good behavior, so I'm going to reward you in this way or whatever. And then versus grandparents, you cannot control. You have like no control over grandparents. They're just like on their own and they're going to do whatever they want. Like even if you advise them, like, well, we're trying to teach them this. Well, we want to give them this. So,
We're like, we're grandparents, let us be grandparents.
And then I think for her, because we were stationed, somewhere else, and visiting times was like either they came up and visited or we came down for the holidays. Holidays, you're coming down, you're already expecting Christmas gifts, most likely, but still, like, they were like, just let her eat this, like, let her have this, let her have that. She's at grandma's house, like, it's fine. And I'd be like, oh my God, you're breaking like every rule that I've made. And then I have to take her back home and I'd have to like remind her, no, you don't do that. Like, she was really hyper when she was little. So we realized that, you know how like you'll dilute the apple juice? So you put like water, and even the doctor will tell you like, oh, just dilute it. No, we were literally giving her like this much apple juice and then it was all water, because immediately she would just like click and she was just everywhere. And we're like, okay, like wear yourself out. But then it was too much. Like she didn't even know what to do with her energy. So then we'd come home and they'd be like, we bought you like the juicy boxes and we have this. And she'd just be bouncing off the walls. And then they'd be like, oh my God, like, is she ever going to go to bed? And we'd be like, well, look at what you did. Like, we warned you and we told you we don't do this for a reason. And you're like, oh no, like, have as much as you want, like, eat whatever you want. We're like, so now you have to deal with her, like, figure it out. But no, I definitely no control over grandparents. I couldn't. I would try. I'd tell them like, please, like, at least don't give her this or that. And they'd be like, okay, fine. But for the most part, no.
No,
they just don't. Yeah. And I honestly think I'll probably be the same way. And I told my daughter the other day, I was like, Zala, if you have a child one day, I just hope you know that I'm going to spoil them so much. And she was like, why? I'm like, just because I can. So I think it's just like a natural thing, I suppose, happens.
Did you ever feel like she had trouble socializing?
No.
It sounds like she was pretty outgoing, but like,
yeah.
So do you feel like she was more comfortable being around adults than kids, since she is used to, because like my son, he was the only child for 4 years, and I feel like he was very comfortable around
with
adults.
an adult.
And then he would kind of clam up around kids.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely way too comfortable around adults, more than I liked. And we were also very vocal about, like, you can't expect an adult to like talk to you the whole time. You can't do this, you can't do that. Like, we did set boundaries with that, because that always kind of freaked me out too. I was like, I want you to be safe. Like, I don't want you, somebody's asking you to do this, do that. No, like, just no. Because it was just so natural for her to go up to like any adult and just have a full like blown conversation, and they'd be like, oh, okay, like, sure. And then you could sit there for an hour and then realize, wait, I'm still talking to this kid. So I'd be like, no, like, so when she was little, for sure, no. She just was always like very open. And then with kids, if we went to a park and I'd tell her, oh, like, play with them, and I'd encourage her, and I'd kind of, like, you kind of walk them over and you kind of vibe it out for a bit, and then you see that they get along and you kind of like step back, like, okay, do your thing, but you're still watching them. She'd have a blast, play with the children, and then we'd visit locations where I'd be like, oh, maybe we'll see them next week. She'd be like, oh, that's my friend. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So what's your friend's name? I don't know. Well, why didn't you ask your friend for its name? Did you not tell them your name? And then she'd be like, yeah, I told them. Well, if you're going to be a friend, you should know their name. She'd be like, no, it's just my friend. And then the children would remember her. They'd be like, hi, Zyla. And she'd be like, hi, friend. Like, everyone was friend for her. So it was like, oh my God. Like, so I felt bad, because a lot of these little kids would remember her, and she would just call everyone friend. Like, she could care less like who you were. She's like, hi, friend. So
listening to her stories.
yeah, she did not care. She's like, everyone's my friend. And then as she got older, we did realize that she almost felt like not like fully like a people pleaser, but she wanted to be that one mellow friend between the different types. Like, she wanted to be able to be neutral with everyone. she didn't like, conflict between her friends or whatever. So she'd be the one that step in and be like, okay, guys, like maybe we should. So I don't know if that's because like an only child syndrome, like she just wants everyone to be okay with each other.
The calm to the storm.
Yeah. So then we would tell her as she got older, like, that may not work out for you for your advantage, maybe later on, like in middle school or high school, like drama's gonna gravitate regardless. So I've always been very blunt and very honest. I was like, this type of scenario can happen, especially in the type of environment that we grew up. I was like, there's a lot that happens. So let me just kind of break it to you, and then hopefully you make the right choices. And then COVID hit. So she's having to not deal with any of that. But still, like, we were very honest, and we told her, some people are not going to be very nice, and you have to be okay with that. And like, you have to understand that not everyone wants to be everyone's friend, and that's going to be fine. But I know that for the last 2 years, even with family, like, she's just a little more reserved, but she's still that silly girl, she was when she was little, and she's outgoing. It's normal. Like, she's growing and she's changing. So
you
totally
mentioned
expected.
COVID. How is life with COVID and having her home? I feel like that's so hard for
that one. Is hard. Yeah, that one has really, really been tough. And those are the times where my husband and I have really been like, well, that really sucks, because if she would have had siblings, she'd at least have those siblings. Or if she, the what ifs or what ifs, that for sure has like brought up a lot of stuff. I know that because of that also, it has been tough on her, because we were looking forward to doing so many sports, so many activities. It was, her start of middle school, and we had hyped it up so much for her. And then it was like, no, just kidding, it's non-existent. Like, you don't get to do any of that. You don't even get to go see your friends, because you just can't,
Yeah.
So I was also very strict with a lot of like gaming. I've always been fairly more restricted. My husband's like the techie person. He'd be like, no, let's get the new this, let's get the new that. Oh, let's get this game. You want to play this? You want to play that? And I would always tell him, like, please don't turn her into like this gamer child, because then you're going to regret it later on. And then all she's going to want to do is be on the computer, and she's going to be like strangers and like da da da. He was like, oh, you're so dramatic. So then I was like on the dot, like, okay, fine, you get 1 hour, like you get this, that, no iPad, no this. And then COVID hit, and it was like, all of your school is online. You want to talk to someone? We have to FaceTime. You want to like do like everything is on the computer. And I realized, obviously, you can't do that. Like, this is the only form of communication she has with any other person. So you have to just kind of let go. And I completely let go. I was like, I'd rather you be like mentally sane
Get involved, yeah.
than me being, like, like this technology hog. Like, no. So I definitely let her do that. And because of that, she, oh my God, like, she'll talk to me about like all these gaming things. I'm like, I don't understand you. Like, I don't understand this language you're talking to me about. And my husband and her will be like, oh yeah, well, like on this and that. And I'm like, I don't get it. Like, I don't know what you guys are talking about. Like, I feel so left out. But, it's keeping her sane. And she does a lot of Zoom calls with like friends. Ironically, some of her closest friends have also been only children. She has like 2 other friends who are only children. And I don't think it's because like, oh, we're just going to hang out because you're an only child. No, it's just their personalities gravitated towards each other. And then they all get along with like their other group of friends. But she's had those friends since she was in like kindergarten, 1st grade. So it's really cute. And it's like, okay, at least you guys like understand each other.
Have something to bond over.
Yeah, because I was like, I grew up knowing only children. My husband's closest cousin was an only child. And he would always tell us, like, you guys are like my brothers. Like, I'm so glad I have you. He's like, but he also had like, other stuff going on. And I always kind of had that in mind. And he talked to her when she was younger. And then as she got older, he's like, I understand you because I'm an only child. He's like, so I get it. And he would be honest. He'd be like, there are like, downfalls to it, but there's also a lot of benefits to it. So I was like, okay, at least that helped her out, I think. And then having that relationship with those two other little girls that are also like only children. So
And with that being said, what are some benefits of having an only child? What do you think?
So you definitely get to learn about your kid, like the ins and outs about your kid, their personality, what they like, what they don't like. Like you get to understand their cues, because it's really that one person that you're focusing on, you know, all the time. You get to build that relationship of closeness, and you know, of course you do that with like any of your children, but I really feel that we have a strong, like a very strong bond, because for the longest time it really was just kind of like me and her. Yeah. I try to be as honest with her as I can, whether it's anything quite on like happening in the world, financial stuff. Like I try to keep it as blunt and honest as I can, so that hopefully she can be like well-rounded and like understand things. And I think that has helped her a lot. I don't know if I would have been that way if I had more children. Like I don't think I'd be as blunt about financially, girl, like look at what's going on. You're gonna have to wait. And then you know, your other sibling, you need to understand because of this, is that. No. So I think just her being by herself, I can be as honest as I am, and it works out great. Also, I can spoil her for Christmas. Like that's always a perk, and I don't feel bad. I mean, we don't go crazy with stuff, but I don't feel bad because I'm like, well, this is like my only kid. So, you know, what am I holding off on? Any interest that she has, I've been able to be present because, you know, I have this one kid once again. So I'm like, I'm gonna make it possible. I'm there for your field trips. I'm there for whatever you want to do, dance, you want to do music, I'm there for it. Like, let's try it. So there really are so many things that come, and they really are so positive, and you wouldn't think of it because you'd say, oh my God, like this child's going to turn out rotten, or like, you know, but it really is such a blessing because you create that bond with them. And I don't know, like I really question it. I'm like, I don't know how it would be with another child. I don't have any other kids, so it's kind of like, okay, but then I hear other parents say that and they're like, no, it's just like a whole new love for your other kid, and you know, you have this bond regardless, and it's like a different bond. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds nice. But you know, I don't get to experience that. So, but I mean, those are the pros. There are obviously some things where you could say, well, there's negatives. Of course, there's an up, there's a down. Being lonely in times like you know how we said in COVID, like she can only Zoom so much, she can only Skype so many family members, she can only hold a conversation with me for so long. Like she's gonna want her like other people, you know, and that's completely understandable. And you do see that sometimes. So then we'll try to distract her, or maybe I'll tell my sister like, hey, just kind of call her and like, you know, check in with her or whatever. But that feeling of loneliness from time to time, it will happen, and it's natural. I mean, we feel it as adults too, you know, it can happen to anyone. They just don't have a sibling to go and bug, you know, when they get bored, or that at least they're fighting with and they get distracted.
That was what I was gonna say, or fighting.
Yeah,
is the key
yeah.
word.
So I'm like, that will happen. I will say though, growing up when she had her cousin, and once again they're 8 months apart, it was hilarious because we would get them the exact same thing. Like they'd have the exact same Barbie doll, and then and we'd be like, okay, you guys play, and they'd play, and then all of a sudden maybe we braided one of the Barbie, like, you know, hair, and they'd be like, I want that one. Like why does that Barbie have good hair and then my Barbie doesn't? And we'd have to be like, you guys, it's the exact same Barbie. Like, why are you fighting? Like, it's the exact same. They're like, no, I want that one. So that was the only type of interaction where she was just like, wait, like, you know, with her cousin. But even like that, she wasn't like that at school. It was just with her cousin. It was almost like she felt maybe this is a type of sibling type of relationship. But that I thought was hilarious. We were like, you guys are playing with the exact same thing. Like one has a braid and one doesn't. Like get it together, kids. But I would say that I do have a coworker also, and that was completely odd. Like she came out of nowhere and she like threw that at me. She was talking about she's like, oh, I don't get too personal into your life or whatnot. She's like, but I know you have an only child, and how's that for you? And I'm like, oh, it's great. She was like, I don't know, I just feel like very strong that I should share this with you. I have a cousin who is an only child. She was like, and her parents passed away, and she expressed to me how hard and how depressing it was for her to deal with it all on her own. And I kind of, and my coworker was like, yeah. And then I tried to explain to her, well, like you have your cousins, you have your aunts, like of course we're all like, dealing with the pain too, and we're here for you, whatever you need. And then the girl had responded, she was like, you don't understand. It's like, you lost an aunt, you lost an uncle, I lost a mom, I lost a dad. Like, it's a completely different thing. You're going to get to go home, you're going to have your parents and your siblings, and you'll be fine. And I get to go home and I don't have anyone. And I was like, whoa, like that is a lot of heaviness to just kind of be like, oh, by the way, I'm going to sneak this in there. Let me give you like my 2 cents. And I had never, thought about that, ever. So that I came home and I told my husband, he was like, why would she say that to you? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't know why she felt like she needed to, but we've never thought about that. And now we have to think about it. One day we're going to pass away. Yeah. And that's her reality, is that she will be by herself. And I can think about maybe my sister. Yeah, I was like, maybe my sister will have children, and and she'll have that, and she can have that close like relationship also, and her other cousins. But it really had not hit. It's true. And I was like, oh my God, what would I have done if I didn't have my sister? Like, when that time comes with my parents, like nobody wants to talk about death or think about it, but it's gonna happen. And I think that was a really morbid type of heavy situation to consider. And then I started thinking about, how am I going to prepare her for this? Because it's going to happen. Like, it's like, we're not going to live forever. So how can I prepare her for that? Because it's going to be difficult. So, I mean, I never thought about that until that one day at work, casual conversation. So
you're like, let's have a baby.
Definitely, yeah. I was like,
by the way.
Okay. So yeah.
So, and then how did you guys teach her with sharing? Because did you guys make sure that she learned to share with you guys? Because I've seen that's an issue. Like, parents are like, oh, she can have it because they're the only child, and then they have a hard time sharing everything. Did you guys teach her by having her share with you and your husband?
Yeah, very early on. And we had a puppy too. He passed away, but we had a puppy, and we would tell her, you have to share with him. I mean, we've used dogs kind of like as her, like, like obviously non-human siblings, but dogs have definitely stepped in that role. And we'd say like, okay, Coco, you can't bite her stuff. And we'd try to train the dog, and then we'd tell her like, okay, you can't take, her stuff. Like, you can't just walk around throwing his toys around or whatever. So we kind of used him as an example, and then we would do it with us too. But kids are always also sometimes going to be like, oh no, well, I want it. And then once again, how do you approach it? How do you teach them like, no, just take it away, or like, no, you have to share. Like, okay, it's your turn now. Now you have to do that. So there would be a lot of like stepping in like that. But she got it, and she was like, oh, okay, fine. But no, for sure, you have to really, train them, I guess, in that sense.
So what words of wisdom do you have for our listeners who are worried about their child having the only child syndrome?
I think, like I said earlier, it really depends on the children's personality, but not only that, but it really depends on the parent, and you being very vocal with your partner also about, what are these boundaries and structures that we're going to have for our kid? What do we agree on? And if I tell her or him, whatever, you have to do it this way, you can't go on and be like, no, because then we're not helping them out, and then they're going to end up doing the complete opposite of what we want regardless. And they're going to have you wrapped around their finger, like, So it really is on the parent to just kind of snap in and be like, correct that very early on. And then I think then you should be fine. And that can be like, you know, whether you have multiple children or you have one child, like it really is just on us to put those boundaries in that structure and then just stick to it. I mean, it's not like the most exciting thing, but if we stick to it, then we're helping ourselves out in the future. Like we'll be, you know, we'll be zen and we'll be fine. But I was scared about that. And I know that for a fact, just being on the stricter side, I guess you could say, it helped us out a lot. So
and that's good to hear. I feel like that's refreshing because I think I hear a lot of parents being afraid to be strict on their only child because they're like, oh, well,
you
they're
feel bad.
And they feel guilty, you know?
Yeah.
So nice to hear that you guys have only one and you guys have been strict, but she's turned out to be a great kid. It benefits all children, whether you're only child or not, to have boundaries and, you know, yeah. So that's nice
for sure.
Afraid to implement those.
And like I said, obviously it's not easy. Like it's not easy. And you're going to be days where you're just going to be like, oh my God, sure. Like, give me
but
for my sanity.
That's
I'm like, we do that all the time with multiple kids.
And I think it's maybe a little worse with multiple kids because you have them coming from all angles and you're like, okay, please.
No,
they know when to get you when you're super overwhelmed.
Oh, absolutely. They know.
No, and I think even my relatives, you know, they started with their children and they had more, and I'd be like, oh my God. And you do get that yearning for like, oh, I remember when my daughter was a baby, and like, oh, that's sweet. And it tugs at you. It does tug at you. And you're kind of like, oh, okay, do I want to do this? Do I not? And then you see them like throw a tantrum or like just do things, and you're like, oh, we are so good right now.
Yeah.
So good. Like, I love you so much. Let me play with you. Here you go. Like, take your baby. Like, I'll see you next time, you know? So it's, I don't know, like, it's just hilarious. So, but you definitely do get that yearning. I mean, you, regardless, or you're at the store and you see the baby outfits, you're gonna be like, oh, well, I don't get to do that anymore. And then also you find yourself like, birthdays or graduations or performances, or at least myself, I was like, well, she has this track meet, so I don't know if she's gonna have another track meet. So I was that one parent that came up with a huge poster and I was all for it, or I was like, ah, and we were those parents. Like we've always been those parents, and maybe it was a little extra, and yeah, sure, she'd get embarrassed and I'd be like, oh, well, you have to deal with it because we're not going to be doing this again. So this is our only, I'm like, this is our only opportunity. So you kind of deal with it, and that's fine. She's like, fine.
With that being said, do you wish that you would have known when she was an infant that she would have been your only one, so you could have soaked it in extra? Or do you feel like you were present and you have no like regrets?
No, I definitely think that I really have tried my absolute best to be there for whether it was school, whether it was, you know, whatever it was for those milestones. I really, really wanted to do that. And I was so grateful because I remember growing up, my mom, you know, they were both working, but when it came to a school event, when it came to a field trip, she went to all of my field trips. And I didn't understand how difficult that was until I was an adult. And I was like, oh my God, like you took time off from work and like you did this and you did that. She's like, well, I thought it was important. And she was that one parent that all the kids knew. They'd be like, oh, Miss Romero, oh yeah. And she'd bring like sandwiches and everyone already knew her. She was like the field trip mom. So I was kind of like, I want to do that. Like, I want to be that one mom. So I really tried my best to be present. And then for things where for some reason I couldn't, because which were very minimal, and that didn't start happening until maybe this last year because of work, we would make sure that my husband was there. He was like, well, we both can't be there, so I'm gonna make sure that I'm obviously there, or I'm filling in for both of us, or whatever. But for the most part, like we really just tried to be as present as possible, because we would remind ourselves like this is our only kid. So, you know, a lot of these events are not going to repeat themselves, or we only have one kid, so let's really try not to mess her up. Like, you know, like we really have the potential of messing her up or not. And like, we want to have a good outcome at the end. So let's try our best to just kind of do
I feel like
we can't
if we still have
so,
this
yeah.
podcast later on, we need to interview you after she goes through her teen years so that you can let us know
Oh my God.
if parenting worked or not.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, I am excited for those years and absolutely terrified. And it's hilarious because I try to tell my husband all the time, like, obviously I was a tween, I was a teenager, and I'm trying to drop hints like this is gonna happen and then this is gonna happen, and appreciate the time she wants to hang out with you now because she's not gonna want to talk to you very soon. That he's just like, no, 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 no. But oh my God, yeah, for sure. We'll see how that goes.
And it's so different from girl teenagers and boys teenagers. I feel like it's night and day. Like, the emotions that go along with being a girl, you don't have them as a boy. Like, you know.
And yeah, you have your period
exactly.
too. So that on top of that, you're two people. I
feel like it's night and day.
Yeah. And you really can't control it because I mean, even as like a woman, you know, you're PMSing or whatever. Some days you're even kind of like, okay, well, I was on one today, and I'm sorry, guys. Like, like, you know. And then other days you're just like, nobody understands me. I feel like. So
the only difference with an adult is like we know when we're PMSing and we know we're full of it, but like as a teen, you're kind of still figuring it out. Like, why am I feeling like this? You can't really put it into perspective. Yeah,
I will say I have kind of pointed it out to her. Like, once again, very honest with her, very blunt about things, and I've told her like she just reacted in a way where it was absolutely unnecessary, or like it was the simplest thing, and I would kind of look at her and I'd be like, do you understand what you just said or what you just did or whatever? And she'd kind of be like, what are you talking about? And I'd be like, you're being really moody right now. Like, you know, I'm going to let it go because I understand what you're going through, but I'm just letting you know that the way you said this or that. Yeah. And then she'd kind of like be like, oh, yeah, I don't know why I did that. And it kind of click. And then be like, well, I'm just letting you know, I'm letting it fly this time because I get it. But don't do it again. And she'd be like, yeah, that was kind of weird. And I'm like, it's okay. It's normal. Like, it's totally normal. I totally get it. It's fine. But no, yeah, they definitely come in like in random splurges. And it's like, ooh, like, where did that come from?
Well, thank you so much, Jessica. Thank you for coming on here and giving us your insight on being a mama of an only child. I'm sure so many of our listeners will really find comfort in this episode, you know, because they're either on the fence of having another one out of guilt, or maybe they'll find comfort like, okay, I don't need to have another one because my daughter or son will be all right. Yeah.
And I would like to say that is that, I mean, any parent, honestly, like, we have to understand that everyone's going to be nosy. Like, they're going to be nosy about, you know, like our situations or whatever. And unless we feel 100% ready, then it really does not matter what anyone cares. Like, we're the ones that are raising them. We're the ones that are putting the financial like burden, you know, like we're dealing with all that, or scheduling. And it's kind of like, yeah, if your kid's asking you for a sibling, yeah, that probably does pull at you. But it's also like, can you do it at that time? Like, you know, like, so I don't know, like really just looking and realize what is the best timing, I guess, for your personal.
Right. And your goals too. And that's good.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Thanks so much for hanging out with us. If you want to catch up on our previous episodes, visit mamasmimosas.com, where you'll get access to all of our podcast show notes, our YouTube videos, and our private Facebook group, where we chat with you about each episode topic and host live question and answers with our favorite mom tribe. Can't wait to see you there.